most people maybe need to build up their self-esteem. Like we're starting from a place where our self-esteem has been like smashed into a deep crater in the center of the earth. Like we're not even starting from ground level. Hello, and welcome to How to Be a Terrible Daughter, the podcast where we hate your parents for you because they absolutely deserve it. We're going to joke about our horrible childhoods. We're going to talk about how we survived them, and we're going to share some tools we've learned along the way. So, who are we? Who are we? I am Megan. I am an energy healer and an occupational therapist.
And I'm Elizabeth. I am a psychotherapist and a multimedia artist.
And we're cousins. We grew up in
God.
the same dysfunctional family. Not
Thank
the
goodness
same
not siblings, though.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. Well, I think that if we were siblings, it's interesting that we're cousins is we have this really unique perspective is that we both had narcissistic moms, but different narcissistic moms. So it's like a really interesting, like our trauma is similar, but like a slightly different flavor because we didn't have the same mom.
I'm
Although,
salted caramel.
yeah, I'm black licorice.
But the other thing about us being siblings is that no one systematically tried to destroy our relationship 24/7.
That's true because we
Right.
weren't siblings.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. Although I do feel like, I don't know if it was true for your mom, but I felt like my mom, there was like a little bit of a competition there because they both had daughters the same age. I don't know. It always felt like, I mean, we've talked about this before. Like, how weird was it that our moms were best friends and yet we never had play dates? We had like five the entire time we were growing up, right? There was definitely a wedge of some sort there for sure.
Yeah. Maybe they were
Oh,
just frenemies, which would explain a lot.
yeah, it would explain a lot, actually. Okay, so today we are going to dive into another incredibly lighthearted topic, as we usually do weekly on this podcast. We are going to talk about self-esteem. Such
I'm
an
sorry, what is
interesting
that?
issue.
I don't know if I've ever heard of it. Could you
It is
say that
something,
again?
yes,
Is
it is
that
it
like a
is a
German compound word?
concept where people actually feel good about themselves and feel some sort of pride in their competencies and accomplishments, which I know is like being on the moon for people who are raised by narcissists.
Well, isn't that narcissism? I mean, I don't want that. Like, if I don't want to feel good
Yes,
about
with
myself,
right, exactly. Without the what is the DSM definition? Like overconfidence in their grandeur or something. I'm not quoting it right, but
definitely grandiosity.
grandiosity. Yeah, without the grandiosity. So a healthy, reality-based sense of who you are and that that is a competent, worthy person, I would say, is sort of the
Sorry,
definition of self-esteem.
what was the middle thing? I tuned out.
Did I make you dissociate? Wow, we are less than 5 minutes into the podcast, and I've already made Elizabeth dissociate. So I think that might be a record.
You're winning. You're winning.
But yeah, we wanted to talk about this because, I mean, self-esteem, I think, is something that it's definitely like a pop psychology thing that people talk about a lot, and there's a lot written about it. But it is one of those things that for children of narcissists, it's like an especially challenging, prickly, complicated, layered levels of sabotage and fucked upness that happens. And so we wanted to talk about it specifically because it's something that I don't think it's this, like, I don't think those tools and techniques that you like read about online will work for someone who was raised by a narcissist because we're starting, like, most people maybe need to build up their self-esteem. Like, we're starting from a place where our self-esteem has been like smashed into a deep crater in the center of the earth. Like, we're not even starting from ground level. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you
So,
have to have a self in order to have self-esteem.
yes. Okay. So, excellent point. Narcissists will systematically erode your sense of self or your confidence in your sense of self or your awareness of your sense of self. So, you're right. Like, both parts of that, like not having a sense of self And then absolutely not knowing how to hold any of your parts of yourself in any kind of esteem, you
Yeah.
know? So, it's a double whammy, right? So I think it can be especially difficult. So we wanted to talk about a little bit about why that is, right? So like why it is just such a hard thing when you've been raised by a narcissist. And then also talk a little bit about, what we have done to help with that. And I will say for both of us, when we were planning this, like this is still a work in progress for both of us. Like I am just now starting to like maybe understand what it could feel like to possibly feel competent in some area of my life of something that I've been doing professionally for like 20 years. So it's an ongoing process. It's not something that either of us have mastered, but we still like think that it's important to share and talk about. Well, I mean, I can't speak for you, but for me, I definitely haven't mastered it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been a therapist for several decades and I still like will be talking on the podcast and be like, wow, it actually sounds like I know something about what I do. Just like
Right?
what I'm talking about. Like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, let's start by talking a little bit about how this happens in the first place. Like, why, when you're raised by a narcissist, is your self-esteem like in a dumpster fire? And the first thing is exactly what you mentioned is that you're not treated like a person, you're treated like an object, right?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
one of the hallmarks of narcissistic abuse is that narcissists are unable to see people as people. They see them as objects, and objects are either useful or they're not. They're either functioning or they're not. And not only that, but the type of object you are changes based on what the narcissist needs in the moment. So, one moment they may need the loving daughter object, right? And the next moment they may need the scapegoat object, right? And the next moment they may need the like therapist or parent object, right? And so
I'm feeling personally attacked. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
And so there's no way to, like, not only can you not be a successful object because you're not an object, you're a person, but there's also no way to successfully be like every object they could possibly need, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
only, you can people please and be their caretaker, but then if they need a scapegoat, then you have to learn how to do that successfully, right? And then if they need a therapist or a parent, you need to learn how to do that successfully, right? Take care of their emotions. So it's an impossible bind, and there's no way to actually succeed at it. I mean, it is a task that is intentionally set up as an impossible task. So there's no way to succeed at it. And so you end up just feeling like a failure for a couple reasons. One, again, you are a human, not an object. You can't succeed at being an object. It's impossible. And then, the rules of the game are always changing. So, like, what
Hmm.
object they need you to be is always changing. So, you can't, just as you're like getting good at being one object, oh, now it's changed up and I need you to be a different object. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I go back to this infancy stage, right? Where, one minute you need your diaper changed, and the next minute you need milk, and the next minute you need to sleep, and the next, you know what I mean? And it's like, and the next
Yeah.
minute you need to be held. And the thing is that a parent, like a good parent, actually can do all of those things. And so really the narcissist needs whatever they need in the moment. It doesn't matter that it's unreasonable. And they don't even really understand themselves what they need in any given moment or why they need it. And oftentimes that leads them to crisis, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
in addition, as the child of a narcissist, you also have to be like a mind reader, right? Because you have to figure out what they need when they need it because they don't know. They're not an
Mhm.
accurate reporter of what they need or when they need it. It also doesn't occur to them that it's bizarre at all to have their whims changed like an infant. You know what I mean? Like to them, that's just normal, right?
Yeah.
Like one moment I needed this and the next moment I needed this. That to them just feels like, well, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
you know,
And that someone else is supposed to do it.
and that someone else is supposed to take care of those needs, right? Which,
Yeah.
again, when we're talking about a baby, it is appropriate for someone else to take care of those needs, but not an adult, especially an adult to their child, right? The child shouldn't have to do that for the adult.
On top of that, you also have to pretend that they're not a baby.
You have to pretend that they're your parent. You have to believe that they're your parent. I mean, that's a survival
Yeah.
thing, right? Like
Yeah.
we mammals need parents for some length of time, right? Humans especially. And so you have to Like that's the role this person has to take is your parent, whether they're good at it or not. Yeah. So the second reason that self-esteem tends to take a dive for children of narcissists is that you're constantly in this cycle of love bombing and derision.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I never knew when I would walk in the door from school or when my mom would walk in the door if I was going to be showered with love or if I was going to get screamed at. I mean, there was really no rhyme or reason. There was no way to tell. It didn't have to do with whether I'd done something wrong or had done something well. Like, it didn't have to do with, like, oh, if I got a good grade on this test, I would come home and I would be celebrated. Like, no, right? Or, oh, if I,
Yeah.
cut class, I would come home and get yelled at. No, it didn't have anything to do with, like, there wasn't a, you know, antecedent and then behavior, right? Like, it was just random, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
this constant, intermittent, random, you're either the best person in the world or you're the worst person in the world, according to the narcissist, is so confusing, especially for a kid who's trying to figure out the rules of the world and like the rules of relationships and
Mm-hmm.
social structures. It's very disorienting. And so, in a way, it's safer just to believe you're the horrible version, right?
Yeah. It's a survival thing. It's like, what is it? Like some snakes aren't venomous and some are. Well, if you want to survive, you just assume that they're all venomous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just assume that. That's easiest, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So being constantly on guard, being constantly aware of anything you might have done wrong or any faults you might have, so that you can either hide them or cut the narcissist off at the pass by like already taking care of them or, something like that. You're just constantly looking for what is it that the narcissist could attack today
Mm-hmm.
so that I can A, try to not do it in the first place, but B, if it does happen, try to hide it or lie about it or take care of it already so that by the time they figure it out, it's done. And that
Yeah.
not only applies to like actions, but also sort of like beliefs about yourself, right? So
Yeah.
if I'm going to be told that I'm a terrible daughter, that I am, all the things my mom used to say to me, that I'm a horrible person, that I'm mentally unstable, best to sort of believe that about myself beforehand in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that I can be guarded when arrows come my way. Do you know what I mean? So I can at least have a shield up.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt as much. Like, so if you really actually and I have memories of this, like having a moment where it's like, you know what? I don't deserve this and this is wrong. And like, this is not, I don't deserve this. I'm worth more than this. And then it's just like, just the hammer goes down and it goes down and it goes down and it goes down. And it just
Yeah.
hurts so much more, you know, than to just think all the time, okay, well, I'm a piece of shit. That is the safe bet, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's sort of only two options when it comes to the reality. So you either can believe that you're a piece of shit, or you can believe that your mom is as mentally ill as she is. And as a kid, it does not feel safe to acknowledge how mentally ill your caregiver is. I mean, again, I think that's a survival mechanism. So
Well, it
psychologically,
isn't safe. It isn't safe.
and it isn't safe, right? So psychologically, if anyone's going to take the blame, it's a little bit like it's a safer psychological structure to blame yourself than it is
Yes.
to blame the narcissist.
Yeah. I mean, because there's nowhere free to go, you
Yeah, you're
know?
trapped. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that makes it different to grow up with a narcissist as a parent versus having a narcissist as a partner later in life is
Yeah.
I do think it may be on an unconscious level, but I think the narcissistic parent is fully aware that that child can't go anywhere. They're not leaving, you know? And
Can I just text my therapist right now?
so, the type and level of abuse can be worse, but not so much that CPS is called, right? There's that fine line.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cycles of love bombing and derision are just so confusing and you never know what to believe. And when you are praised, it's like you're clinging on to this hope for a moment of like, maybe I am a good person, maybe I am a good daughter, and you
Yeah.
hold on to that like a rope that's fraying, but then, 2 days later you get yelled at for some random thing, right? So, and it's not just yelled at for that thing, it's yelled at, you're a horrible person. I can't believe you would do this, right? So it's not just you did a bad thing, it's you are a horrible person.
Well, and at best, the praise and the love bombing gets you to zero, because you're in the negative numbers already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
In
you
terms of
don't,
self-esteem, you mean?
yeah. You know what it is? It's like you're on empty all the time. And then they like put in like, 16th of a gallon. And then it's like,
Yeah.
and then they're siphoning it off on the other side.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the love bombing and derision is one thing. And the next thing we wanted to talk about was this idea of narcissistic supply. So narcissists, well, first of all, they feed off of drama and chaos, right? Because they're unstable. And so to them, it feels more familiar to create a world around them that is chaotic and unstable.
Mm,
And so they will erode your self-esteem so that you are a person who doesn't feel stable and centered and grounded, because then you're a better narcissistic supply. If you're someone that's stable and grounded and centered, as soon as they pull their shit, you would look at them and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right?
yeah.
I'm not going to talk to you if you're going to be that mean to me, right? Like, which again, as
Yeah.
a kid, you can't really do, right? For both developmental reasons and also safety reasons, right?
Yeah.
But narcissists thrive on having people around them who are unstable and who feel isolated and who feel alone. So that's another reason they do it is you're not a good narcissistic supply object to them if you're stable and centered and have good boundaries.
Yeah. I think it's threatening. First of all, it provokes their jealousy. And I think it's threatening to them somehow that it's like a stable person is dangerous,
Yeah.
right? And so an unstable person is able to be manipulated, right?
Hmm.
And if you can't actually have genuine connections with people, manipulation and power is the only way that you can be safe in relationship.
Yes. It just makes me think of like, you and I were talking a little bit about how we feel a little bit like Cassandra, that we can see narcissism and all these other structures and all these other systems that some
Yeah.
people can't. Like they just accept it as like this is normal. Yeah, it makes me think of like how when people don't have a genuine sense of centeredness or self-esteem, that yeah, that what they go for is like power and domination and hierarchy and things like that.
Yeah.
The fucked up thing is narcissists are doing that with their own very small children, like their own infants. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they are not looking to nurture their children, they're looking to have power and domination over them.
Yeah. It's so horrible. I mean, it is so horrible that they don't even want to know that it exists, right? Which is, why people who speak out, people like us speak out, get a lot of flack, right? Well, they can't be that bad. I mean, that's really what they're saying, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
you should forgive them or blah, blah, blah. But it's in their mind, they're just like, I don't want to think that it's possible.
I think people can't imagine it's possible that mothers would say and do things that were this horrible to their own child. I mean, I started saying at a certain point, it doesn't come up as much anymore, but when I first went no contact with my mom, and yes, I would have all sorts of people, either people that knew her or people that didn't know her, but just people are like, oh, how bad could it have been? Or like, maybe you'll change your mind when you have kids. I think you're just misunderstanding. And for a long time, I would have a couple stories that I had in my back pocket that were like so horrific that they were like, oh, right. And part of that was because I wanted to shock them. Like, I wanted them to feel shocked that they'd said what they said to me and like realize the inappropriateness of it, right? That they said, like, you
Yeah.
should just be nice to her.
Yeah.
But then after a while, I was like, you know what? Retelling these stories is traumatic for me. And like, they don't get access to my trauma, that's hard for me. That's emotional labor for me to like retell these stories and get re-traumatized by them just so that they could understand, right?
Yeah.
So at a certain point, I just started saying to people, the people like, how can you stop talking to your mother? She birthed you, she raised you. And I would just say, you know what? I said, I know that through movies or TV, you've heard stories of like horrific child abuse that in your mind you would be like, wow, that child should not talk to that parent. Like that was horrible. That was horrific. I said,
Yeah.
just imagine that. I said, that's what my mom did, you
Yeah.
know? Because then I didn't have to relive the trauma, but it sort of gave them an idea that I was not talking about your
Yeah.
run-of-the-mill challenging childhood. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that is to really kind of get under their defenses, being like, let's be honest here. In your heart of hearts, whether you've said it to someone or not, you've heard a story and you've been like, no, you know what I mean? But maybe that's not something that you've ever thought was okay to say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know that the thing that I think about is, the Grimm story, the Grimm fairy tales, right? All of the evil stepmothers. The Grimm brothers actually changed those stories. In those stories, they were originally the biological mother, or I mean, like,
Mm,
biology. And so, but it was so unnerving and scary that they were like, you know what? We're writing these down for children. And so we're going to make it less terrifying. But it's like,
slightly
it's
less
not like it
terrifying. They
was.
were still terrifying. There's definitely like a social taboo to saying that a mother could be that horrible to her children, which is one of the things that makes it so hard for people like you and me to speak up, right? Because we are
Yeah.
definitely violating a social taboo.
And I think the thing that's so funny about it, and this is true with a lot of societal taboos, which is that the thing that is so terrible is not actually speaking up about it. The thing that is so terrible is actually the abuse. But what ends up happening is that it is so horrific and so terrifying to people that that it's the messenger, right? You kill the
Yeah.
messenger
Yeah.
instead of actually making whoever it is accountable for the terrible things.
Well, and
You
it's
know?
also, this is so horrific for me to hear about that I'm going to make a taboo so that it's just not okay to talk about, so I don't have to hear about it,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to end up punishing, yeah, and allowing it to continue to happen. That is the thing. It's
Yeah.
enabling.
When people get too uncomfortable about something, like when you start trying to have a conversation about, like, let's say, like the unhoused population, right? And people get too uncomfortable about it, they're just like, oh, I just don't want to talk about that, right? Well, great. You cannot talk about it because you're in a place of privilege where it doesn't affect you, right?
Right. Right.
But not talking about it certainly does hurt the people who are experiencing this right now by like just having it be something that we don't talk about or we don't acknowledge or we blame the victim, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's certainly a way for people to protect themselves, protect their own mental health, I suppose, but it's a privilege to be able to do that, right? It's a privilege to not talk about some of these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing that narcissists will do, I'm just getting back to our list here that we wrote, is anything that you do well, they will take credit for it. And
Hmm.
as the child of a narcissist, I don't know about you, but I definitely tended to tailor my interests and my accomplishments to things that were acceptable and that the narcissist would be able to use to like brag about me, right? So I did really well in school because that was really important to my family is like being really smart and being an intellectual. So I knew that if I excelled in that area, I would get extra praise, right? But the narcissist will always take credit for it. So it's always like, oh, Megan's doing so well in school. We're so glad that we switched her to that private school where she can really thrive, right? Like it was never actually
Yeah.
me, right? Like I didn't actually get credit for it for doing anything.
Yeah.
So I never learned what it was like to have that feeling of doing something well and feeling proud of myself. Like it's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
something that I feel like I'm in like nature documentary special when I'm watching other people feel proud of themselves or accomplished. And I'm like, watch. the human
Yes. Yes.
feel a sense of pride and accomplishment at achieving a goal. And I'm like, what does that feel like? Like I definitely feel like a weird alien outsider.
Yes. I've had to reverse engineer it. So like I'll find myself like saying to Eric, I'll be like, "Are you proud of me because of blah blah blah?" And then I'll be like, "Okay, wait a minute. Okay, so I want him to be proud of me. So that means somewhere I think I deserve to be proud of something that I did. So maybe if I like archaeologically like go down really far,
Yeah.
I can access some kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then it's just like snatched out of my hand. You know what I mean? It's like
Yep.
I
Yeah.
get a femtosecond. It's like, and it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's tough. It's
I
really
do
tough.
it in ways where I got a promotion at one of my jobs and I had to apply for it and interview go through like several interview panels. I have this moment where again it feels like an outsider. I'm like, oh, that's something someone should feel accomplishment about.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then for like a millisecond, I'm able to be like, I'm that person. I should feel accomplishment about that. Like I should feel proud of myself. But yeah, it
Yeah.
is so fleeting. I remember when I started with my most recent therapist and we were just like laying the groundwork for EMDR. And she said something about like, so like at the end of the session, here are some, techniques we can use for recovery and for stabilization. And one of them was she was like, you can imagine yourself in a moment where you felt like really like competent and proud of yourself. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And she was like, I think we may have identified one of the problems here.
Yeah.
And she tried.
I,
She was like, when you graduated from graduate school, I was like, no. Like, when you did this, when you did that, I'm like, no. She's like, how well you take care of your dog. I'm like, no, you're supposed to do that. Like, that's just what you do. There's no pride there. Like, you should feel like shit if you don't do that. But there's no, again, the most you can get to, you're already in negative numbers. The most you can get to is zero, right? Like,
yeah.
the most
Yeah.
you can get to is I am doing what I should be doing, right?
Yes. The way that I think about it is like the ceiling. Once you reach the ceiling, it immediately becomes the floor.
Yes. And you often say, which I love, with a narcissist, you're only as good as your last film, which is like an old Hollywood saying that probably not
So
everyone
true.
listens to this knows about. But like there used to be a saying in Hollywood, I don't know if it's as true anymore.
It
I'm
is.
sure it is. Yes, that's true. That, for any
That's how you get people to
filmmakers,
overwork.
right, that's true. For any like filmmaker or actor or whatever, like you are going to get hired for your next job as long as your last film did well, right?
Doesn't matter how many Oscars you've got or yeah.
How
Or
many how
yeah.
many Oscars you have, how much success you've had. But as soon as you have a film that does badly, the studio executives are going to be like, I don't know, should we gamble on this person? They bombed, right? And
Yep.
so
Hmm.
you're never judged on your whole sort of history of accomplishments because everyone has highs and lows. It's really the
Yeah.
studio is just looking at your last film and being like, well, they did win 5 Oscars, but that last one bombed. So maybe they're on a downhill slope now. And I don't know that we want to invest in that, right?
Right.
And that's exactly what it's like with a narcissist is you may have had a string of, successes and things you did well or things you got praised for, but as soon as you do that one thing not well enough for their
Right.
standards in the moment, because their standards are changing constantly.
Well, yeah, and part of it is also that like they cannot take themselves into account. So like in my little fantasy, I'm thinking about, the movie production company. Well, of course this thing bombed because you didn't listen to the writer and the director. You focus group this thing to death. You had them rewrite the ending. I mean, it's like, you took out 5 minutes that were completely key to the whole thing. And
Right,
yes, it bombed because you fucked it up,
right.
right? It's like the thing about, what did you say? The narcissist will break your legs and then make you run a marathon, and they'll give you shit the whole time about how bad you're doing, and then gripe about how much the doctor's bills are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's another good point about self-esteem is like, I feel like self-confidence and self-esteem is, in the context of all that has come before, right?
Yeah.
So it's, you can feel like you did a good job relative to what you were up against or relative to what the conditions were. And when you're raised by a narcissist, none of those things are taken into account.
Yeah.
So, like if I were to get an A minus on a test, but I took it when I had a fever of 103, it was still, why didn't you get an A?
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah.
no sort of, I don't even know what the word would be for that, but there's no awareness of the context or the environment and how that may affect you.
It's capitalistic. You have to meet the quota. It
It
doesn't matter.
is.
It's capitalist, right?
Right.
It's like you're a machine. It doesn't, like I was talking to my kid just yesterday. They were like, I was a terrible kid in second grade. I'm like, okay, let's do the math here. Your grandpa died like 2 months before school started.
Yeah.
And then, like, 2 weeks before school started, I got so sick that the EMTs had to take me out of the house and I was in the hospital for a while. I mean, it was like, like, and you were, undiagnosed, blah, 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 blah. So you were
Right.
getting zero support and whatever. So you were a bad kid in second grade, like,
Oh, you're such a good mom.
really? Oh, thank you. See,
Yeah.
this is it, right? I mean, and I'll tell you something. I'm like, oh, I'm a good mom. Like the only thing I can remember is my last film, which is that like I got them to school on time this morning. And that's
Yeah.
it, right? That's my last film,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally.
I mean, and it's funny because, I know that this is described as a hallmark of both borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, but there's a lack of continuity to your sense of self. And I think for children of narcissists with CPTSD, it's not necessarily that there's a lack of continuity with your sense of self, but there's certainly a lack of continuity with your sense of self-esteem.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I also think that some of it has to do with something kind of ineffable, which is buildability, right? Because I will just be perfectly honest. When I was in graduate school in my early 20s, we took the MMPI, right? And
Hmm.
I came back with some like borderline features. And I was so upset. I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Of course, right? Yeah.
Right. I'm
You know,
borderline.
no, I mean, I was like, that's not me, but
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, honey. Like, it was accurate. Like, in retrospect, it was accurate. It's like I was the bird who grew up in the bird nest, with the narcissist borderline, and I learned to sing those tunes.
Yeah.
But going to therapy and doing that work, I was able to grow and I was able to create that foundation.
And I think I had an acute awareness of this at way too young of an age, and that it contributed a lot to my depression when I was a teenager and in my 20s
Yeah.
is, the way to create a narcissist or someone with borderline personality disorder is essentially to be raised by a narcissist or someone with borderline personality disorder. It's not the only way. There can also be like other types of child abuse, right? Like sexual abuse or things like that will also,
Yeah.
predispose one to these types of conditions. But it certainly is, like if I were in a lab and I was like, how do we make a narcissist? Like, have a narcissist raise them would be like one of the conditions, right?
Dr. X wonders.
Right, exactly. And so I think I knew this as a teen and in my
Yeah.
20s, and I knew what the symptoms were, and I could see it in myself. And a lot of times people with CPTSD do get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, especially women, incorrectly, because there is this like gray period or amorphous time where I feel like it could go either way,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And it really is just, I mean, not just, but I think one of the things that is sort of the determining factor is for whatever reason, do you have the strength and ability to do that introspective work and think, how do I fix this? I don't want to be miserable like this, right?
Yeah.
Versus just blaming everyone else for the problem, right? For taking some sort of awareness of like, I've got some issues. How do I fix these?
Yeah.
I know it's not going to be easy, right? But
I think for me, it's like I already felt so bad about myself that I couldn't bear to be that too. Does that make sense?
well, there's the horror and the fear of it. I know what you mean
Yeah.
when you talk about that those traits popped up. Like for years, that was my fear that I
Yeah.
was actually going to become
Me
the
too.
thing that was so abusive to me, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and because I was constantly told I was, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but my mom was
Yes.
constantly telling me how selfish I was, how I didn't think about anyone else, blah, 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 blah,
Arrogant.
blah, right?
Yes.
Arrogant. Yeah, exactly.
You
Right.
just take,
So,
take, take. Mhm.
yep, all of this is so confusing when you're a kid because, there's a voice inside you that's like, I don't think that's true. But you're
Yeah.
being told this by a person who you're supposed to respect, right? Your parent, over
Yeah.
and over and over and over again. And so you start thinking, am I just not seeing it? Like, am I really arrogant and self-centered and they're right and I'm wrong? Like, it really does start eroding it at your sense of self-esteem, right? I mean, in your sense of who you are.
Yeah. The good news is neither of us are serial killers. It's a huge shock.
To every therapist I've ever had an initial session with. Why are you not a serial killer or like, you know,
Well, there's
a
still
drug
time.
addict?
I mean,
That's true. Who
if
knows?
only I had the confidence, maybe I could reach my goal.
I'm just not confident enough to be a serial killer. Anyway, let's switch topics a little bit and talk about, I mean, for everyone, it's such an individual thing of how you learn to cope with all of these things we just talked about. But for you, what were some of the ways when you were first starting that you were able to sort of claw your self-esteem out from the depths of hell and the gutter and back to like a more reasonably normal, healthy sense of self?
It's called therapy. No, so I did do some really good CBT in therapy, but the thing that actually really changed things for me was finding the craft. So my tradition of the craft was actually founded by three mental health care people, which is
Hmm.
just so great.
Can you explain to people that don't know what the craft is?
Oh, okay. So witchcraft. Yeah. So my primary tradition that I studied in was the reclaiming tradition, which is
And by the
an
way, we love witches here on the pod.
oh
Witches
yes.
are fantastic. So yes.
Yes. So yeah, and I think one of the most powerful things is that nature doesn't give a shit about whether you got the A or the A minus. They don't care which word you used in that email to Karen. They don't care whether you were 5 minutes late to your meeting. They don't care. None of that affects them at all. And there's actually a really beautiful, it's a saying, but it's also a song, which is the ocean refuses no river.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And, nature doesn't need me. So I think that's sort of the other thing, which is just like, I walk into the forest on a nature walk and I am not being siphoned off from
Hmm.
because it can't function without me, right? It is perfectly fine. It doesn't care whether I'm there or not. It's not interested in me. And all of the beings are living their own beautiful life. And, our human society and all of these things is a very, very small part of existence, a very, very small part. And a lot of it is made up.
I often will go sit and look at the ocean when I'm upset.
Yeah.
And I think it's very similar in that I feel so small, but in a really good way. Like, oh, I'm part of this larger thing. This thing that I'm so upset about is actually not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like the ocean will go on,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And even this terror of being a monster, right? I could be the biggest monster I could possibly be, the most horrible person. It's not going to affect the ocean at all. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
In particular, there is a tool. in my tradition. It's in a couple of others too, which is called the Iron Pentacle. And the points of the pentacle, the five-pointed star, are each considered our birthrights as human beings, but that society has distorted. So there's something that belonged to us, essentially, each human being, that we need to reclaim and rebalance for ourselves. And the points are sex, pride, self, power, and passion. And they
Mm.
all interconnect and they feed one another. And the sex, right? Sex is also life force, right? So
Hmm.
it's like there's this moving through and this balance, right? So if you think about like pride, you have what's out of balance, right? Is either arrogance, right?
Hmm.
Grandiosity, right?
Hmm.
Or shame.
Hmm.
But some pride is important,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and that these things are so distorted. It's not a sin to think well of yourself.
Right.
What I realized was that when I feel ashamed of myself, it doesn't fuel truly good behavior.
Right.
It's actually the opposite. It
Yeah.
makes it harder for me
Yeah.
to behave in a way that's honorable, you
Right.
know?
Nothing ever actually got better or improved through shame, right?
Right. Yeah.
Shaming someone or shaming yourself does not actually help you feel better or do better, right?
Nope.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so for me, therapy too, as well. I will say there were a couple things as well. One, when I was young, when I was a kid, it was my pets because here was a creature that loved me no matter what kind of day I'd had, no matter what I'd done or hadn't done, no matter how I looked or what I had achieved or hadn't achieved. When I was little, it was a cat I was close to. And so cats are moody for sure. Sometimes the cat did not want to be near me for his own reasons, but it didn't have to do with anything that I'd done or hadn't done, right? The cat wasn't like, I don't want to be pet today because you're a bad person, right? Like the cat was like, I don't want to be pet today because I'm a cat. I'm just not in the mood. And it was
It's not you, it's
so,
me.
right. It was so refreshing to have a relationship with a creature where I wasn't constantly being blamed for their good mood or bad mood,
Yes.
right?
Animals can't gaslight you.
Animals can't gaslight you. And that was really my first relationship. I'll say like intimate relationship because I had teachers who didn't gaslight me. I'm sure I had like parents of friends that didn't gaslight me, but I was very guarded. I mean, we've talked about this earlier in the podcast that I thought I was shy the whole time when I was young, and that was always what I was told. But I don't think it was shyness. I think it was just being guarded, being careful. But pets, I felt safe. I felt safe being emotionally intimate with pets and opening up. And so my cat, if I needed to cry and I needed to be silent because I needed my mom not to hear, I would bury my face in my cat and cry, right? He was safe. So that was sort of my first model of what it looked like to have a relationship with someone who wasn't perpetually trying to crush my self-esteem. And then later, I think for me, before it even felt safe to necessarily have relationships with people where I would completely let down my guard, I think that was one of the things that drew me to spirituality, right? Is meditating and having these firsthand experiences of this consciousness greater than myself, whatever you want to call it. We'll call it Steve for the sake of this story, of having this relationship where I felt loved in a way that wasn't manipulated, was just because I existed,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I almost had to have that. I wouldn't say it was before I had that with other humans, but it certainly developed like in tandem, having it with other people. And I think that's probably a reason a lot of people who've been through trauma are drawn to spiritual practices, not necessarily religious practices, because they're imbued with all sorts of crazy
Hmm.
traumatic things themselves. They can be. This direct experience of love and acceptance and equanimity that I think a lot of people haven't had from other people.
Yeah. Well, if you can't have it with other people, right? Because people are dangerous, you got to go find it on your own. My first therapist who I did EMDR work with, she used to say that people who were religious were afraid of going to hell, but people who were spiritual had already been there.
Oh, I like that. I like
Yeah.
that quite a bit. I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah. Yeah. She was great.
Okay, let's do a little mini mom off where we tell some stories about crazy ass shit that our moms did. Stories that would make the person who was like, but it's your mother. How could you not talk to them? Be like, oh, I have a story in mind. Do you want me to go first, or do you have a story in mind? Do you want to go first?
I do have a story. I don't know whether I should go first or not. I'm just feeling bitterness. That's just me. It's Elizabeth bitter time.
I like Elizabeth bitter time. It's good. Get it out. Be bitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. What are you feeling? You want to go first? Go
Go
for it.
first.
You're in the feeling.
I'm in the feels. I got my feels. Okay. So when I was 12 or 13, well, throughout my childhood, several times, my mom would get pissed off at me and she would systematically go through my entire room and throw out all of my possessions except for clothing, books, and art supplies.
Mm.
So,
I'm already mad.
yes. Yes, I lost at least two entire record collections. Like, and she would just put them in the garbage in a giant garbage bag and then like I don't know, whatever. Anyways, so she's going through my room and this would take hours. It would just take hours. So I don't know what hour we're in, but she finds my diary.
Oh no.
So my diary was like actually like in a folder. It was like loose leaf pages and it was a diary in the form of a letter to like my favorite pop singer. It was over 100 pages and I had spent months and months and months on it, like maybe a whole year. And I would like rewrite it and I would like comment on it and then like comment on my comments and like it was the most precious thing.
It was your heart and soul.
It was my heart.
Yeah.
And I was going to be a writer. Like that was actually
Yeah.
like, and she picks it up and I see it and I just like, like, I'm like, oh my God, because I'm like, she's going to read it and she's going to go through it. She's just going to tear me down and then she's going to find stuff that she shouldn't know
Yeah.
about or whatever. And I am so terrified. And then she just takes it and she just rips it in half and drops it into the garbage.
Oh my God. So simultaneous heartbreak that this thing that you is so precious to you is gone, and relief that she didn't
No,
see any of the things in it.
no relief, not at all. I mean,
No?
okay, maybe no, because I mean, later it was relief, but it was the like, it was worthless to her. It meant
Mm.
nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't even worthwhile in terms of finding things to get angry about and hurting me with. It was
Mm.
completely worthless. I'm like not over it.
What a fucking bitch. I mean, and I saw your mom do this to you in like small and big ways, taking the thing that's most precious to you and destroying it, and basically, like, in this case, literally calling it garbage is such a fucked up thing to do. It's such a hallmark of a narcissist. It's so horrible to do to a child. Like, just can you imagine systematically taking everything that was precious to your child or that they'd worked hard on and destroying it? Like, I can't believe you're as healthy and normal as you are. She's crazy. She's
Just
crazy. I
soul
am
crushing.
so
I mean,
proud of you for being able to have things in your life that you hold precious now and being able to actually like hold on to them because I know that must be hard. What a
thank you.
fucking bitch.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I want to punch her. I
Thank you. Maybe
just,
you can text my therapist.
ah,
I didn't write. for years.
Of course.
And when I was a freshman and no, a sophomore in college, I finally went to therapy. And my therapist was just begging me to start a journal because she's like, you say one thing and then you say another. And I know there's like six thoughts in between this and that. And I don't know how you're getting from here to there. Please write it down. When I was able to start a journal, I would write one sentence and it would just
Yeah.
be like, today was okay.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me. And I can't tell you how many pages, how many pages of like, today was all right.
Today I went to class. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Your mom, oh, so glad she's dead. So glad she's dead. That's just
Mhm.
terrible. That's just terrible. I
Yeah.
want to repair your little 13-year-old heart. I want to just
I'm
like put it
working
back
on it.
together and like put some, salve on it and like bring it some tea and chicken soup until it feels better. That just sucks.
Working on it. Working on it. Yeah.
Well, let me know if I can help in any way because I know what that feels like. I mean, yes, my mom would also take things that were precious and trash them, and it's just the worst feeling.
Yeah. She was the worst.
It was the
Your
worst.
mom. Your mom.
My mom? Oh, I thought you meant
Your
your.
mom.
They were both the worst. I don't know. It's like we have this crazy mom off to have a competition, but like I really don't know that there could be a winner here. They were both pretty fucking terrible.
Yep. You know what's winning? The truth.
Yes. We're winning. We're surviving. We're
We are
thriving.
winning.
We're doing okay,
Yeah.
you know? Like
It
that's
hurts a lot.
winning.
It
It
hurts a lot.
does. It does.
But you
Yeah.
know what? This is better than shitting on our own kids and on the people that we love, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
I would
Yes.
pick this
I th
a
I think
thousand
for
times.
years we shit on ourselves, right?
Yes.
And I think now we're shitting on the appropriate people, right? And
Yes.
so it finally we've gotten there, right? That, you know, we're shitting on the
Yeah.
people who deserve it.
Yep.
My story is also about my mom destroying something precious to me, but in a different way. Are we ready?
I'm ready. I'm prepared to be irate.
Good. Get your irate hat on.
Mama bear.
The cat that I was talking about earlier was a birthday present for me when I was 7. I'd been wanting a cat for years. And finally, when I was 7, my parents got a kitten and it was my kitten. And it was the whole thing of like, well, it's your kitten, so you have to feed it and you have to take care of it and all that, which is fine. I did all that. As you can imagine, I was an incredibly responsible 7-year-old. And the cat understood the assignment. The cat hated everyone in the family except me. Actively hated, would scratch and bite, but was the kindest, sweetest thing to me. He would sleep every night on my chest with his head tucked under my chin, like our hearts touching. Like every night he would sleep like that. The cat understood the assignment. This was a miracle cat. We got the cat when I was 7. I'm now at college, so I'm like 20. Cat's 12 or 13. I've left the cat at home and I've gone off to college. And my sophomore year, around March, February, March, I get a call from my mom and she says, the cat, who's now like 13, the cat is going into kidney failure, which happens to cats. It's very common when they get older. And the vet doesn't know how long he has to live. There is a procedure we can do, it's essentially kidney dialysis, but it would only give him a couple more months. It wouldn't cure this.
Hmm.
And I'm calling to see what you want to do. And I am devastated at the thought of
Yeah.
losing this cat. I am devastated at the thought that I might not be able to see the cat again and say goodbye because all I wanted to do is like snuggle that cat one more time.
Yeah.
So I say to her, please do the procedure so that I can see him when I come home for spring break in a couple weeks.
Just a couple weeks.
Just a couple weeks. And she's like, well, okay, but it's really expensive and it's kind of throwing money out the window because, again, it's not going to cure him. It's just going to give him more time. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I want to see this cat one more time.
If she didn't have to make you pay someone else to take you to school, she would have had the money. I'm sorry.
Right. She's sort of hemming and hawing, and I don't know, your dad and I are still thinking about it. We're not sure what we're going to do. And I was like, look, I'm like, here is my credit card number with the expiration date. I'm like, please, if you guys can't afford it, I will pay for this treatment. I just want to be able to see him one more time. And at the time, I think it was like a $200 or $300 procedure. And I was making at my college work study $9 an hour. So $200 or $300 for me, I mean, it would have taken me months to pay that off on my credit card, right? Like I was not offering money that I had. I was offering to go substantially in debt so that I could see this cat one more time.
Right.
My parents had that money. $200 or $300 to them at the time would have
Oh,
not
yeah.
been, that was one dinner out. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes,
that wasn't a huge
I
amount of money to them.
I do.
So she was like, well, fine, whatever. And I remember being like, just, promise me you'll do this, use my credit card. I will call the vet and give them my credit card. She's like, no, no, that's fine. I'm like, okay.
Oh, no, right? Then she has an excuse.
Right.
Oh my
So
God.
spring break comes around. I come home. I walk in the door. Where's the cat?
Oh no.
Where's the cat? I thought you were going to get this procedure done. Well, it was really expensive, and we just decided it wasn't worth it in the long run because all it would do is extend his life, and he was suffering, and we didn't want to do that to him, and we thought you wouldn't want to do that to him. He wasn't suffering. I don't know if you know anyone in kidney failure, but it's like you get dialysis and you feel fine for like a while, right?
She should have called you
She
back. She
she
should
never
have
called me
called you and been
back.
like, this kid, yeah.
She
Mm,
never called me back. She never let me know. She just
oh,
let me leave that conversation thinking that if she and my father decided they couldn't afford it, that she would use my credit card to
yeah.
do it, and that I didn't need to contact the vet and set that up, that she would.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she just let the cat die and didn't tell me
Yeah.
and waited until I came home and walked in the door to tell me that, oh, yeah, the cat's already dead.
She
And I
also didn't
was
have to
like,
call you at all. If she had just, you know what I mean? Like, if she had been honest with herself, actually, no, she probably was honest, but it was like, no, you know what? I can fuck with Megan this way,
yeah.
right? You know?
Again, I can destabilize Megan. The narcissist needs their
Yeah.
narcissistic supply to be unstable.
Yeah.
What's a way to destabilize Megan? I'll tell her that this thing that's the most precious thing in the world to her is dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yes. But I should be the most precious thing to her. So why should she have this cat? Why should I care? Why should I care about her when she doesn't care about me thousands of miles away? She's
Yeah.
got her own
Yeah.
job.
So then I got
What?
so mad. I was like, I gave you the credit card number. You told me I didn't have to call the vet. I would have called the vet. I would have made the arrangements. And of
Exactly.
course, what I was told was stop overreacting. It's just a cat. I was like, okay. Yes, it's just a cat, but it was also the only thing that knowed how to show me love that wasn't manipulative my entire childhood.
Right. And it's not like anybody in your house knew about attachment theory.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
The outer layer of my intestines are rippling. I am, I am, oh God, those fuckers.
Yeah.
Do
I
you,
mean,
do,
it's what
it's
narcissists do.
cruel.
Rip away anything that makes someone feel safe or secure or loved, you
It is
know?
needlessly cruel. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my mom's middle name.
Yeah.
Needlessly cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how we got through the week, some tools we used or some things we tried that perhaps helped us. Do you have an idea? I have something that I could share. Do you have something you want to share?
I do. Do you want to go first?
You go first. I just talked. Your turn.
Speaking of nature and the craft, there's this really beautiful form of grounding, right? Where you connect to your body and then you kind of connect to nature and the universe. And it's called the tree of life.
Mm.
And there's many ways to do it, but it's basically that you imagine that you're a tree and your roots go down into the earth. You take sustenance from the water and the earth underground, and then you reach your branches up and you grow leaves, and then you can take in the air and the sky and the sunlight, and it is the most delicious thing. It is so delicious. And there's so many different ways to do it. So I'm going to put some different ways to do it in the show notes. One of them is there's some songs you can learn so that
Mm.
you can sing them to yourself. And there's different ways to do it as a meditation and that kind of a thing. But that's one of the things that I do when I go out for my walk. I'll like go and I'll find a tree and I'll say hello, and then I'll just drop my roots down, you know,
Oh,
and then
that's nice.
yeah,
I'm gonna
roots
do
down and
that.
branches up.
And there's a couple trees in my neighborhood that I love, and I think it makes me think next time I'm gonna go up to it, and I always like stand on them and sort of lean on them and feel their support. But it just makes me think next time I'm gonna go up and be like, "Can I be a tree with you for a few minutes?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
just slip that human skin off
Yeah.
and then you're actually you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty great.
One of the things I learned in one of my early energy healing training classes that I took was, because what you're doing in energy healing is you're essentially slipping into someone's energy for a period of time, right? So that you can access
Sure.
what's going on for them.
Hmm.
And so one of the things we learned was doing that, but it was, sort of through these fun ways. And I remember we would, go into different animals or different whatever. And I remember we went into a sea turtle and then went from a sea turtle into a whale that we saw nearby.
Wow.
Both being a sea turtle and a whale, that experience, I mean, it was like the slowness, which I think would also
Mm-hmm.
you'd get from it being a tree, right? Like time is
Mm-hmm.
different as a
Yeah.
tree or a whale or a sea turtle. Sea turtles live like 400 years, right? So it's just, and
Yeah.
they move slowly, right? It's just a different way of experiencing time in the world and your environment. So
Yeah.
thank you for that reminder because I haven't done that in a while. And it was one of the very first things I learned. And I remember just loving it so much, that experience of you
Mm-hmm.
know, being able to go into a being that just has such a different nervous system and experience. And yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
lovely. I love that. I actually used something that I learned through doing this podcast as one of my tools this week. I'm pretty excited to share. So I'm going to change the details of this story and I'm going to leave out some names to protect the innocent and the guilty. But basically, I was talking to someone earlier this week. And we were talking about something that happened about 15 years ago, right after I finished cancer treatment. I'm going to change the details of this story, but it's essentially going to be the same. Essentially, what it was like I had landed from a long flight, and instead of taking public transit after landing on this flight, I had asked if we could take an Uber because I had just finished cancer treatment and I was jet lagged and I was not feeling well. And it was late at night. And I was telling this story, and the other person told me that doing that was like I was acting like a princess. And I got really upset because I was called a princess a lot growing up. And when we talked a lot about like all the things we were called and all the things we were told we were selfish and whatever. And princess was a one that I got a lot. You're being a princess when I had any needs, right? So I got really upset about this for probably about 24 hours. And I was working through in my head, I was like, well, here are the reasons I wasn't a princess. I had just finished chemo and I had just come off a 6 hour flight and it was late at night and there was a time change and, da 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 da, right? Like all these trying to justify in my head why I wasn't a princess. And then I realized at a certain point that the best thing to do in situations like this is exactly like the tagline of our show, be the villain. I was like, you know what? Fine. I was a princess. Be the princess. And I just started sort of repeating that to myself whenever a thought would crop back into my mind of like, well, and here's another reason why I wasn't a princess. I'm like, you know what? Be the princess. If you're going to see me as a princess for wanting to take an Uber when I'm jet lagged and have just finished chemotherapy and have no hair and am weak and tired, okay, I'm a princess. So I took the tagline of our show and I modified it and I used it. And I was just like, I'm fine. I mean, essentially it was like, I'm fine if you think I'm a princess.
Totally.
Whatever. Like,
Totally.
okay.
And that means the next time we meet, you're going to have to be flying my sovereign flag and you're going to have to be playing my national anthem. So fuck you.
Yes. Yes.
Or I'll talk to the UN.
Yep. So, it was a really good exercise in it doesn't matter what other people think of me. It's really none of my business. But I think that's so much harder when it's a childhood trigger thing. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it felt good to be able to just be like, okay, they can think I'm a princess. That doesn't affect me at all. Whatever. That's
Yes.
just good information that this isn't someone that I want to get advice from because clearly their view of me is not one that I appreciate, or think is accurate for that matter.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
anyway. So yeah, I'm a princess. Did you know? I'm a villain and a princess. Wow.
A villainous princess.
I'm a villain.
I love it. I love it. That is amazing.
All right. So that is what we have for you for today. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Instagram at Terrible Daughter Pod. You can also email us at H2B, that's the letter H, the number 2, the letter B, terrible@gmail.com, H2B terrible@gmail.com. And do you have anything else you'd like to tell the people?
I have no idea. And they like, be the monster, be the princess.
Be the princess, be the villain, be the princess,
disappointment.
Be the disappointment. All of the things that they accused you of.
The trash panda.
Just be it. Just
the ungrateful one. Yeah.
I am an ungrateful princess, and I'm so proud of it.
Oh my God. I love it. Oh, that's a t-shirt.
That is a t-shirt.
Ungrateful princess.
I'm an ungrateful princess, and I'm so proud of it. Yes, I love it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. We'd be so grateful if you'd follow or subscribe and rate and review our new podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Make sure to share it with friends, family, or anyone that you think may benefit from this content.
And as a final reminder, you are not the crazy one.